I am the champion of a sound monetary system, a gold standard as it is under the Constitution, and a foreign policy based on strength, which rejects the notion that we should be the policemen of the world and that we should be a nation builder. We need...
All right, let's start with a question from the audience.
Hello. Can you tell me what specific actions you'll take to address the costly consequences of illegal immigration while preserving the rights of those who seek to immigrate legally?
Congressman Paul, you're from Texas, the state with the longest border with Mexico. Is this a viable option, what we just heard?
Well, to talk about it, but I don't see it as being very practical. I think it's a much bigger problem. You can't deal with immigration without dealing with the economy. The weaker the economy, the more resentment that there is when illegals come in. If you have a healthy, vibrant economy, it's not a problem. We're usually looking for workers. Even under today's circumstances, a lot of businesses are looking for workers and they don't have them. They're not as well trained here. But also, the way we're handling our borders is actually hurting our economy because the business people, visitors have a hard time of coming in. I mean, we don't have a well-managed border. So I think we need more resources, and I think most of the other candidates would agree we need more resources. But where are the resources going to come from? I have a suggestion. I think we spend way too much time worrying about the border between Afghanistan and Pakistan. Use some of those resources on our own border.
The U.S. has been largely away in its foreign and trade policy with Latin America. In the meantime, Iran and China have been increasing their influence over and involvement in Latin America through the leftist and left-leaning governments. What would each of you do as president to more deeply engage in Latin America and, importantly, to support the governments and the political parties that support democracy and free markets?
Congressman Paul.
Well, I think free trade is the answer. Free trade is an answer to a lot of conflicts around the world, so I'm always promoting free trade. And you might add Cuba, too. I think we'd be a lot better off with Cuba, trading with Cuba. So I think the more you can do to promote this free trade, the better off we'll be. But as far as us having an obligation, a military or a financial obligation to go down and dictate to them what government they should have, I don't like that idea. I would work with the people, encourage free trade, and try to set a standard here where countries in Central America or South America or any place in the world would want to emulate us and set the standards that we have. Unfortunately, sometimes we slip up on our standards and we go around the world and we try to force ourselves on others. I don't think the nations in South America and Central America necessarily want us to come down there and dictate which government they should have. And yet, I believe with friendship and trade, you can have a lot of influence, and I strongly believe that it's time we have friendship and trade with Cuba. The senator mentions standing up for some of these nations, but he doesn't define it. But standing up for nations like this usually means that we impose ourselves, go and pick the dictators, undermine certain governments, also sending them a lot of money. It doesn't work. Most of the time this backfires. They resent us. We can achieve what he wants in a much different way than us using the bully attitude that you will do it our way. This is not a benefit to us. And besides, where are you going to get the troops and where are you going to get the money? Because you're talking about force. And I know of a much better way than using force to get along with people.
Very important subject, housing. Not only here in Florida, foreclosures really, really bad, but all over the country. And a lot of people are wondering if the federal government contributed to the housing collapse in recent years. So we got a question that came into us. Let me put it up there and I'll read it to you. How would you phase out Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac? Does the private mortgage industry need additional regulation? That from William Schmidt. It seems that they both acknowledge they both made money from Fannie and Freddie. Should they return that money?
That subject really doesn't interest me a whole lot. But the question does. the question is, what are we going to do about Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac? It should have been auctioned off right after the crash came. It would have been cleansed by now. It should have been sold. But maybe it's my physician background, but I think an ounce of prevention is what we ought to talk about, so we quit doing this. But we know how the bubble came about. It was excessive credit, interest rates held too low, too long. The Federal Reserve responsible for that. Community Reinvestment Act, which is affirmative action telling banks they have to make these risky loans. At the same time, there was a line of credit which allowed Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac to, to make more money, and it was assumed that they would always be protected. Now, you can't argue. I've talked a long time about cutting off that credit from the Fed. I was trying to prevent this stuff. Also, I oppose Community Reinvestment Act, as well as I had legislation in 10 years before the bus came to remove that line of credit to the Fed, to the Treasury. So,
are you with Ronald Reagan as far as the tax rates, as Senator Santorum has suggested, Congressman Paul?
No, he taxed too much. My goal is to get rid of the 16th Amendment. And the only way you can do that is not run a welfare system and a warfare system and policing the world. But I do want to address this subject about taxing the rich. That is not a solution. But I understand and really empathize with the people who talk about the 99 and the 1, because there's a characteristic about what happens when you destroy a currency. There is a transfer of wealth from the middle class to the wealthy, and this has been going on for 40 years. So the middle class is shrinking, they're getting poorer, and they're losing their jobs, and they're losing their houses. But Wall Street isn't getting poorer, and they are the ones who are getting the bailout. So we have to address the bailout and the system that favors a certain group over another group. If you don't have sound money, and if you have a welfare state, no matter whether the welfare state is designed to help the poor, the welfare system helps the wealthy. And there has been this transfer of wealth. So if we could stop all of these transfers to the wealthy class, but the solution isn't to tax the wealthy. If you give an honest product and the customers buy that product, you deserve to keep that money and earn that money, but there's a big difference between those who earn money and those who rip us off through the government and the monetary system.
Congressman Paul, you're a physician, you're 76 years old, you would be the oldest president of the United States if you were elected. Are you prepared to release your medical records so voters out there know what your health is?
Obviously, because it's about one page, if even that long. But I'm willing to challenge any of these gentlemen up here to a 25-mile bike ride any time of the day in the heat of Texas. And that subject has come up, and sometimes in fun, but sometimes not in fun. But, there are laws against age discrimination, so if you push this too much, you better be careful.
I raised the question because you remember 4 years ago, the same question came up with John McCain, and he released his records finally. I remember our own Dr. Sanjay Gupta spent hours reviewing those records. So let me go down and ask all of you, are you ready to release your medical records?
Happy to do so.
The Dr. Paul is quite ready to serve if he's elected. Watching him campaign, he's in great shape.
All right, we have another question from the audience. I'll look forward to seeing your medical records. Go ahead. Let's take a question right now. Please introduce yourself as well.
Good evening. My name is Matthew Bathel. My question is, what would your plan be for the future of manned space flight and the future of NASA?
An important issue, especially here in Florida, where a lot of people have lost their jobs as a result of the decline of the space program. Yesterday, Speaker Gingrich outlined a pretty long plan on what to do about it, and he said that by the end of his second term, if he were elected president, there would be a permanent base on the moon. Good idea? Texas, the space program, very important there as well. Where do you stand on this?
Well, I don't think we should go to the moon. I think we maybe should send some politicians up there at times. But I went into the Air Force in 1962 and studied aerospace medicine. Actually had a daydream about maybe becoming the first physician to go into space. That didn't occur, but I see space, the amount of money we spend on space, the only part that I would vote for is for national defense purposes, not to explore the moon and go to Mars. I think that's fantastic. I love those ideas. But I also don't like the idea of building government-business partnerships. If we had a healthy economy and had more Bill Gateses and more Warren Buffetts, the money would be there. It should be privatized. And the people who work in the industry, if you had that, there would be jobs in aerospace. And I just think that we don't need a bigger and newer program. When you think of the people, I mean, health care or something else deserves a lot more priority than going to the moon. So I would be very reluctant. But space technology should be followed up to some degree for national defense purposes, but not just for the fun of it and, for scientific. Newt's mentioned this quite a few times about balancing the budget for 4 times. I went back and looked at the record. The budget the national debt during those 4 years actually went up about $1 trillion. What he's talking about is he doesn't count the money he takes out of Social Security. So Reagan nor you had a truly balanced budget because the national debt goes up and that's what we pay the interest on. So I think you've stretched out a little bit more than you should have.
I'm currently unemployed, and I've found myself unemployed for the first time in 10 years and unable to afford health care benefits. What type of hope can you promise me and others in my position?
Let's ask Congressman Paul.
Well, it's a tragedy because this is a consequence of the government being involved in medicine since 1965. When I was growing up, we didn't have a whole lot, but my dad had a small insurance. But medical care costs weren't that much. And you should have an opportunity. Medical care insurance should be given to you as an individual. So if you're employed or not employed, you just take care of that and you keep it up. When you lose a job, sometimes you lose your insurance. But the cost is so high. When you pump money into something like housing, prices go up. If you pump money into education, the cost of education goes up. When the government gets involved in medicine, you don't get better care. Cost goes up and it distorts the economy. It leads to a crisis. But your medical care should go with you. You should get total deduction on it. It would be so much less expensive. It doesn't solve every single problem, but you're suffering from the consequence of way too much government and the cost going up because government has inflated the cost, and we have a government-created recession, and that is a consequence of the business cycle.
Your mandate is no different than Barack Obama's mandate. It is the same mandate. All right. He takes over. All right. You take over 100%, just like he takes over 100%, requires the mandate. All right.